I'd like to call this meeting of the Coventry Town Council to order at 9 a.m. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pascal.
Here.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Here.
Councilmember Shockley.
Here.
President Lima.
Here, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the event of an emergency, those present here this morning, that's weird to say, may exit outdoors 1 or 2 in the back of council chambers to the front lawn or back parking lot of Town Hall. We'll now move to public hearing. Do I hear a motion to open public hearing?
Motion.
Motion by Councilman Pasqua.
Second.
Second by Councilman Capaldi. Any discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
4 in the affirmative, motion passes.
And matters for public hearing. Manager Parrillo will give a brief overview of the FY25 budget.
So as we discussed last meeting, the last public meeting, a lot of input regarding school aid and I think the overall consensus of the need to increase the MOE. So Bob and I met with Don and Chris yesterday, just trying to set some parameters as to where we think the number is that's workable. Obviously, based on the council's recommendation, the school committee's recommendation, what the Auditor General has said, Bob and I have identified a bucket of money. It's about $815,000 that we feel could be utilized without adversely affecting the budget. Now, obviously, I think Don and I are close to a number that we think works. I mean, I'm probably anywhere between 850 and 900. I know Don's around $1 million. I'm not going to speak for Don. He's here. But I think there's a number there that this council could increase that number, whether that's MOE, whether that's capital, whether that's ARPA. There's a lot of combinations of numbers, but just to give you the big chunks that Bob and I have identified, we believe the levy can go up about 200,000 without adversely affecting currently what we're doing. There's 243,000 in that debt service payment, 130 in capital from the school committee. They could either roll that into impact fees, those projects into impact fees or the bond. There's a 50,000 in pilot revenue that Director Savetti identified. And there's the sanitation vehicle, the 190,000 there. Again, these are buckets that we feel won't adversely affect the budget without making changes to things that everything's important, but things that we're trying to really finance, whether it's paving, sidewalks. We don't want to adversely affect the police budget. We don't want to touch snow plowing and stuff like that. We'd like to, again, it's definitely up to the council on where you want to take it from, but we feel that these 5 buckets give you enough flexibility to decide in what direction you want to go in. And with that said, I mean, I don't know if Don wants to add anything, but that's kind of where we are right now. And basically, we want to give the council flexibility to kind of pursue what your ideas and where you guys want to be.
Mr. Savetti, anything to add?
You know, again, just to reiterate what the town managers has mentioned, these are the items that we think are the easiest lift and without impacting the overall budget. I know some of the council members have reached out on some different ideas and a little bit from here, a little bit from there. Again, we think if we attack these items, you know, there are items that we can restore in future budgets. As we talked about, sanitation vehicles probably are a year to 18 months out or so. So getting that debt service in the following year. And just based on where we are right now with the bond issuance for the school department, you know, if we can get that issued sometime in the September, October timeframe, in speaking with bond, our financial advisor regarding the bond, they feel that we can push that first debt service payment off until fiscal 2026. So again, we think those are the easiest pools that we can reach into without disrupting some of the other budgets that are currently in place.
Mr. Cowart, did you want to add anything?
Yes. So, Don Cowart, Superintendent of Schools. The manager described our conversation exactly how it went. We worked together. We discussed opportunities to increase the school allocation. I advocated for allocation increase. Obviously, Dan's right. I think we need more, probably more than he can give, but I think that's how it goes, right? And I definitely wanted to sit in MOE just because I think that maintenance of effort is going to be important for us to maintain our budget in future years, which speaks to the Auditor General's point about making sure the schools are adequately funded so that we don't end up in a structural deficit. If the funding sits outside of MOE, then we could be in the same position in years to come. We also discussed the newest letter from the Auditor General, and in that letter, they stressed in 2 or 3 different places how important it is for the school department and the town council to work together, to collaborate, to find solutions that are beneficial to both, but also are going to have to impact both. And so I understand that if I don't get exactly what we need for the school department, that we're going to have to make the adjustments that are required. They'll be difficult, they'll be hard, but increasing funding for the school department is crucial for us as a community to continue to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, I will invite members of the public, those present who would like to come forward and speak, come to the microphone, make sure it's turned on, and state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Caddick, 1017 Tioga Avenue here in Coventry. I'm here to discuss any cuts that might be made in the schooling program. And I understand that there was discussions of cutting the AP courses. For the first time, what I understand in 35 years, they have a Calculus 2 AP program at the school because there are kids that are starting to overachieve here in Coventry. Excuse me. My stepdaughter, my own 2 daughters went through the Coventry schooling program, did very well. One of them with autism. Did a lot of fighting for that, but we had the legal system behind us because the lesser is always overlooked. So we wrote laws to protect them. And I think the reason is because they assume that we're always going to take care of the brightest, the kids that have the most, that can do extremely well. My stepdaughter is graduating Coventry this year, and she's going to Duke University on a full ride pre-med because of her Calc 2 AP program. She's president of the National Honor Society and just turned over the presidentship to her sister for the National Honor Society, who is also going into Calculus 2. These kids have an opportunity to go Ivy League schools for free. That, I believe, is what brings people into our community. Responsible taxpayers will come here seeing that we're overperforming the other schools. And they're going to bring their kids here and they're going to pay taxes here, and that's going to help us. We cannot afford, with the rankings and the ratings in mathematics that the school department received, to punish the brightest students here. There are a lot of places where cuts can be made, I believe, in the schooling program. That should not be considered one of them. That should be one of the last ones. We cannot punish the brightest students who have opportunities through hard work and determination to go to schools like Duke and Brown and Harvard, which her sister is getting invitations from Harvard and Yale now. So please, I appeal to you, and all the cuts that you're going to make, please don't punish these kids because they're working so hard to do well. And those AP courses are essential to getting them into these Ivy League schools. I thank you so much for your time and everything that you do for the town of Coventry. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else next? Miss. Yeah.
Just to congratulations. I couldn't be more impressed by your children and stepchildren, and I'm glad that they got that opportunity at Coventry High. I also wanted to say, I have neighbors whose children have completed a semester of college in high school because of the AP courses. And I think the savings there for future and the opportunities provided to those children for their future is really worth discussing. What AP classes we should and shouldn't have, I don't know. I'll also say that I know a lot of students make other choices after middle school to go to high schools outside of the system. For whatever reason, they might choose to do that. But I can say that the children in the National Junior Honor Society, for my son's freshman year, did decide to stay at Coventry for the most part. I see them at events now. And a couple of those students took geometry in middle school. They had the opportunity to take an extra math class, probably to prepare them for something like a calculus 2. And maybe I am just making an assumption because of my special affinity for the 7th grade class this year, but they seem to be exceedingly bright as well when you look at these standardized testing that they do and the standardized tests they take. I know a lot of them have parents who are teachers and are planning on keeping them in Coventry. Mrs. Cohen spoke the other night. Her son's immensely bright. And as someone who has typically bright children, he's differentiated. And she's planning on sending him to Coventry High School as well. So I do see these AP programs. I don't know how many we should have. These are things that I think are going to have to be discussed over time is, do we have the appropriate programming for the children who are coming up in the different age groups? Do we have too many AP classes? Like, are there things we should be cutting to make our high school more affordable? But I just wanted to speak to those programs because I think you're right. I think there is the assumption we take care of that class, but I think really it's both ends that sometimes get cut off, and we want to keep those. We want to have people having that place to emulate. So once again, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I want to reiterate too as well, while we have so many more people engaged in the budget process, which is great, I think people learned a lot too when there was engagement around the reconfiguration process in terms of the school committee and town council dynamic. And that's once the town council makes a lump sum allocation to the school department, the town council has no say over how that's spent. That's all up to your school committee to decide what's increased, what's cut, what's developed, etc. So I just want to, I know many here in the room already know that, but I just want to articulate that for those on Zoom and anyone else who may be new to engaging in this process. But just wanted to articulate that. And again, congratulations. Thank you for being here on a Saturday and engaging this morning. I believe Ms. Hunt was next.
Thank you. Good morning. Trisha Hunt, 526 Camp Westwood Road. Perfect segue. Someone new to the budget process and learning. Some of my questions today are just to gain clarification for me and understanding the process that the town goes through. I did try to do my due diligence and look online on the website before asking these questions. Some things I found answers to, some things I didn't. So when you go through the budget process, do you ask, so I saw on the report that there's like the departments ask, and then there's what the manager suggests based on that, and then what we're adopting. When you go through that process, do you speak to those departments about those cut or what the, I don't know who to direct the question to.
So the director and I meet with every department head to find out what their priorities are for the year, where they are staffing, equipment wise and so forth. And then they propose a budget. So we do meet with each director. Yes.
Okay. And then those kinds of questions, are they just based on, are they specific by line item? Are they more just like, would you be, I guess I'm wondering, what are those conversations like? Are you saying, would it be okay if we cut $1 million? Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, again, we go line by line item with each department head. So we go through their entire budget. We obviously have all the personnel information, but then I did want to also add that each department head then also comes before this council, where the council can ask them questions about their budget. And if the town managers eliminated items that they had in their budget, they can sit here and advocate to the council to try to get those items restored.
So kind of like
And
the,
as, if I could just add, as council members, we're seeing also, you'll notice the columns, they show the history of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And we see the budget and we see the actual, and just in terms of even if you're up here or you're a member of the public, the thing that we're doing is we're looking at the historical spend. So sometimes we might look and say, why do we keep budgeting for this the same year over year when you're not spending nearly to what you're budgeting to? And like, those are kind of the basic, but also this year, I had solicited at the end of last year, kind of what was the department able to accomplish this past year? And what didn't you get to because of funding or otherwise that you'd like to get to? And we talked about that in, I think it was February. So that way the council can see, what were they able to do with the budget that they had, and where could we be if we could figure out how to increase the budget? So, but I appreciate the question. I just want to add from when it gets to this perspective.
I think we also have the opportunity to learn a couple things. Like when I first started on the council, I think I made assumptions that like the library, for instance, we were having a hard time with budgets. What can we cut? And a lot of their money that they get from the state is contingent on doing certain things. So you kind of have to spend to get. And I think that's something similar with the schools in certain instances. But you learn those things about the departments, and you learn the different funding sources. Maybe like the police department has some different funding sources, so how they factor those into their budget. And so there are a lot of different things that you learn about the departments. And also sometimes the department heads come and they say, I think I can get a grant for that. So cutting that's fine. I don't need that back, but this is something I could use in my budget. So those are conversations that we have.
Okay, great.
Oh, yep. Councilman Haskell.
Yeah, and for myself, when I'm looking at the budget, I'm just, if I see a large increase in a certain line item, we ask for clarification on why. And this time when Director Savetti took over, he reorganized a lot of the budget where retirements came out of a different area, things like that. So it changed the way things looked. So we needed clarification and had those conversations about sometimes a department looked like it was a big increase, but it wasn't. It was just actually putting the money where it was supposed to be, and it was classified in a more appropriate manner. So those kind of conversations are what we have really when we're going through the budget.
And I appreciate, because I could see that on the line items where it'll say like a reduction of 100%, but then an increase of maybe 80%. And you could see where the money went from one side to the other. So I found it very helpful. When you go through that process, is that including the school department? Do those same questions get asked by town council members about?
Yes. So it starts actually in December. There's a law that requires us to assess the next 3 years of forecasted budgets, and the town has to submit theirs and the school submits theirs, and we do that forecast. And that's where we've all heard, Director Savetti mentioned, here's what we anticipate the town may be able to give for those increases in terms of the allocation. And then Mr. Cower also expresses, here's what we believe that we're going to need for allocations. Then we also discuss what our anticipated surplus or deficit would be based on that 3-year forecast. Then from there is when, much similarly, I know that Don and Dan meet with the school side in depth, and I believe you guys meet every other week regardless. So more than, and the other departments meet with them and prepare in that respect as well.
Okay.
And then we do have a meeting where I believe it's the school committee comes and we ask questions, and Don gives us a lot of paperwork. And we have a lot of detail to go through. The school department does a really good job of telling the story of their budget when they come and talk to us.
On that, it might be good for Mr. Cowart to speak to this as well.
Yeah, I kind of looked back wondering how that process went this year, and wondering like, how did we determine the amount that each department could live on? Because I do recall there
Curious
was,
about that as well.
and I'm not like I don't want to go line item detail, but I remember in a previous meeting, there was an ask from the police department about their computers. And when I was looking back at their previous funding, it looks like we've been giving like a healthy supply for their technology right along. And the manager had said, I think that it could be a little bit less. And they said, please give us more. And it seemed like a very easy process that we just said, yes, we'll go back to that. And of course I'm like trying to, it was 96,000 we gave them in 22, 41,000 in 23, 86,000 in 24 was what you had suggested. And then it went back to 115. It seems like a pretty healthy, and again, it's kind of like the bigger picture of it is, I'm just wondering how that correlates with all the departments. So maybe, I don't know, Don, do you feel comfortable?
Oh, Mr. Savetti had a comment too.
So just regarding the police department, that line item specifically. So again, when the departments submit their budget, we receive that as part of the process while I'm meeting with the town manager. We're looking at actuals for the last couple of years. And as you know, the town's been a little behind in audits and we're trying to get caught up. But during that process, I had recommended to the town manager that we reduce the budget. He agreed. But then when we had the review with the police department, you know, at their presentation here, we learned that the majority of that 100,000+ for that specific line item are actual contractual obligations. So there was very little that was in there for small components and items that really they had flexibility with it. So that's why we had recommended to the council at one of the most recent budget hearings that that line item get restored to where it was because it was contractually obligated.
Okay.
Mr. Cowart?
Thank you. So, you know, it's interesting, if you look at funding in Coventry, not just for the schools, but for the town over the years. And I know we've had a few different models in terms of how we determine our town budget. You know, we went from the financial town meeting to the all-day referendum to a different model when the charter changed. But if you look at the funding in Coventry over the years, it's a little bit like an EKG, right? You're high, you're low, you're high, you're low, and there's no sort of like steady sort of forecasting and building of what you need as a community to go forward. And so what it does is it puts us as a school department in a little bit of a pickle, because when we have years where the funding is low, then when we do our 3-year projection in October, early November, which is me getting to the point of the question, is we're trying to now look at where we're at and where we think we'll be in the next few years, based on the fact that, you know, some years we get what we think is absolutely appropriately funded, and in other years we get not as much. And so we try to come up with a 3-year projection. So what we usually do, and it's part of what we do as a school committee and as a charter for the town, is we meet and present a 3-year projection in November. I did bring that projection also in front of this committee. It's not the traditional budget process in terms of we're presenting to the town council our line by line budget. That's not what we're presenting. We're presenting a budget summary that basically says, here's what we think we need from the local allocation. Here's what we're predicting we may get from the state. Here are the other revenue sources, and here are the expected expenses based on what we know right now and what we forecast to happen. And then in December, by charter, we do meet as a joint committee and council, and we go through our projections, what we think we'll need. The town does the same thing. We have conversation, questions are asked and answered. And at that point, we're still not sharing details by line, but we are talking about what we need. And then on the school committee side, in January, February, then we're building out our budget for the next years, and we are going line by line. And so the town gets our line by line. Typically, when I submit all that paperwork to you, when I give you our budget package, it has our description and our story and what we do as a school department, because I think it's important to make sure the community knows we're not just coming and asking for money, but how we use the funding that we get and how it benefits the school and the community. And we provide that. And then usually in February, March, that's when the school and the town leadership get together and we start going line by line. I will say that Mr. Savetti knows quite a bit about finance and school finance, and our finance director is new. He's finishing his first year. So we've had really great opportunities to not only discuss what we have and what we predict, but also how we could look at things differently and be creative and find solutions that benefit everybody. And then in terms of our cuts, our adjustments, you know, we know what we're going to ask from the town. We make sure that we make the adjustments so that whatever budget we present to you is a balanced budget. And then once we get the allocation, then we're forced to then rebalance our budget by making adjustments and cuts. So when the provisional budget came out, we had to go back to the drawing board. And that's when we started getting to these deep cuts that some folks are speaking to, and some, you know, parents are advocating for things to be returned. We technically haven't officially cut anything yet, right? We're waiting on the allocation and the vote on May 7th before we finish our budget for the school committee to vote. So we have a list of things. Many of our cuts in the beginning were really just based on enrollment, which I think is appropriate. When your enrollment changes, you make adjustments to make sure you're working within the scope of what you have in front of you. The second round of cuts that we made are a little bit more in line with what we need as a school department to be within laws and regulations and contractual obligations and things of that nature. And there are things that, there are categories of things that sometimes we call nice to haves and sometimes we call have to haves. And we make sure we have the have to haves first, and then we look at the nice to haves next. I don't say that publicly often because I think it's all important, but I think it is the most important thing for us is to make sure that we're doing what we're responsible to do legally as a school department, and then try to build up from there. So that's why we continue to advocate for funding, because we want to make sure we're well-rounded and not just doing what we have to do, because that's not going to keep people in our community.
Did you have other questions you wanted to ask?
I have other questions related to the budget, but not necessarily.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, go for it.
So, oh, sorry.
Yep, sorry.
So I just want to add a comment. So when we're talking about budget, you know, we're talking about the projections, the forecast, everything else. Even this budget is a projection, right? We're estimating where we're going to be. One item I just want to bring out in particular is the state funding, right? So state aid for education included in this budget right now is what the governor's presented. We're looking to approve a budget on May 7th. The governor's final budget or the state's final budget's not going to be issued till June sometime. So that number could dramatically change. If that were to change either up or down, obviously that education revenue goes directly to the school department. They would have to adjust their budget for that as well. So if you go back a year, 2 years, actually 2022, I believe, you saw that what was approved by this town council, whoever was sitting in those seats at the time, was approximately 900,000 less than what the state ended up giving the school. So at that point, you know, the town's already committed to the maintenance of effort. The school had their number. That extra 900,000 went directly to the school department where they could utilize, and they utilized that, I believe, for many capital items, which were
Necessary.
needed.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though we're going through this all tonight, there, you could still be seeing some adjustments
So
in
the, like,
June.
I think it's roughly 27 million.
28 million. Yeah.
28 million in state aid could.
That's
not-
what the governor's
That,
proposed. at
and
this
that's what's always wild to me is that there's all these unfunded mandates on school departments from the General Assembly. And then there's also the mandate in general that you have to maintain that effort, but the state doesn't have to follow that. Like the state can decide to lower that allocation and and the other thing is they don't have the same deadlines that we do to submit budgets to municipal finance. I mean, you've seen them. They hang out in June until sometimes 1 a.m. deciding these budgets when we've already voted on ours. And so it's it's always seemed hypocritical to me that the General Assembly gets to do whatever they want and wildly fluctuate and give us and I've learned a lot in terms of we get a certain estimation in the beginning of March of what we could get, but it's going to fluctuate all over the place, as Mr. Savetti said. So the funding formula for school state aid needs to be completely overhauled. I know you know this, but it's so wildly overdue, and there's models just right over the line in Massachusetts and in New England that make so much more sense, yet we love to punish ourselves here in Rhode Island. So
Yes, I agree. It was a question of a neighbor of mine who came to the last meeting about the state aid and
Yep.
how that formula works. And I was trying to give him my best knowledge that the formula is sorely lacking. And that's why when you go across the border, you see schools that are in better shape. You see curriculums that are more updated because the state funding has a very different formula in
Mhm.
those places. So okay, thank you for clarifying that. Can I ask, and please know this is not a for or against. I just have a question about the Johnson's Pond funding within the budget. I know that there was a meeting that just happened on Thursday. And when I looked through the FYE 25 budget, it looked like there was a line item for $5,000 for Johnson's Pond. And I'm just wondering if could you just explain how the budget could potentially be impacted by if we get Johnson's Pond?
I think that was just the council had asked to put something in there as a placeholder in case there was some expenses. But as of April 1st, the lease is up. So the $50,000 was removed, but they wanted to keep that line item there. So we just put $5,000 in there as a placeholder.
And how would the budget be impacted should the town take on the dam and I know that it's currently not in repair?
Mhm.
Is that, I think it pertains to the budget, right? Like, because it could impact our budget and put us in a potentially unexpected situation.
I just want to be careful. once
Yeah.
again.
Hopefully the funding mechanism, there's been a number of, and I haven't been participating in that. The solicitor himself has been involved in that with outside counsel, but I believe there's been a number of potential funding options. So it has not been settled. It's just wrestling the beast right now, as I understand it, trying to maintain Johnson Pond for the benefit of the community. What that will take financially, I don't think has been decided as a final decision for the council. But there's going to be funding options that it'll be discussed and presented. I don't want to start speculating
Yeah.
what they are, because there are a number of options to raise money besides just immediate budget. Right.
Okay.
And I don't think
And-
any financial advisor would tell us to take money from an operating budget to pay for that.
That's
So-
exactly my point.
I just wanted to make sure, because I think sometimes public perception is different. And so I wanted to clarify it publicly that should we take that on, those monies wouldn't come from the operating budget that we have planned.
Yeah, no. And I appreciate you asking that, and your patience and grace and understanding. We can only disclose so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think for our budget, it's just one more budget specific question. I was up very late last night looking at some other towns and cities that I felt like were comparable to
What a
us.
Friday night.
Yeah, it was wild at my house while my kids were sleeping. So I guess I think that the biggest thing I noticed as I compared budget to budget is that besides line item is the other town budgets are very, very comprehensive and thorough in the sense that I mean, just their table of contents is sometimes 2 and 3 pages long so that you can understand all the departments, what did they accomplish last year? Most departments have specific goals, like our goal for next year, our goal for the year after. And it's all explained in like one really comprehensive document. I think maybe moving forward, it might be helpful for us to have our budget presented in a fashion like that, only so that the town taxpayers can really understand that, like, when we put 16 million forth for the police department, this is not line by line, but like a little summation or a graphic of something to say, this is what they accomplished with all that money like in the last year's budget. This is what their goal is next year. It was really helpful in understanding. They all seem to have, of the 7 town budgets I compared, they all have really comprehensive budgets. And I think our budget was great, a great Excel document, and I gathered a lot of information, but it took a lot of inferring on my part. And I think that that's never good when people are making their own assumptions about the budget and where the money's going and why. And the other thing I noticed was that on our website, our comprehensive plan, it just says it hasn't been updated since 2022, and it says it's coming. So I think that that might also be, is it someplace else? And I couldn't find it, or we haven't, it's not done yet. And that's okay. I think that maybe part of that process would probably really help the town to understand your vision and how we can support that vision.
Yeah, so I completely agree. I think part of the reason that our budget hasn't been presented in that particular way is just, and I'm not looking into this as an excuse. It's just, I know Mr. Savetti walked in last year and we had 2 years of audits not completed. We had 18 months of unreconciled statements. We had paper statements lying everywhere. And it's just taken till now for him to kind of get the game in front of him. Ideally, I'd like to have a budget that's an award-winning budget presentation like Mr. Murray and his team do over in South Kingstown. I'm right. You guys have won awards for your budget. Yeah.
I think Cumberland did also.
So yes, down in South Kingstown. So ideally, that's where we'd like to get to. So I don't disagree with anything that you said, but Mr. Savetti, I think, had something to add.
I agree 100%. I came in January of 2023, and as council president just mentioned, we were still working on July 2021. So we're optimistic that by the end of June, we'll have the last 2 years audits finally completed so that we can move forward with the bond, and hopefully come this time next year, you'll have a budget in front of you that can have some of that additional information. Similar to the audited financial statements. In the front of the audited financial statements, you have a management discussion analysis section that summarizes what's in the audit, because
Yes.
most people don't know how to read the rest of the financial statements. So you have that summary. So hopefully we'll be able to get something together, but it's been a matter of, trying to get to that point and what's most important at this time.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
And Ms. Hunt, oh, sorry. Did you have something, Ronald?
That's definitely a goal of ours. I mean, Mr. Murray's budget's great. South Kingston's is great. Smithfield, Cumberland, a lot of them are really good. There's just so many fires to put out, and to get to a level playing field. Now we can start to grow. I think right now we have been the last year kind of, again, survival mode, just trying to move forward. And now I think from this point forward, we'll be able to start to grow, and you'll see different things happening. And that's one of the things on the list.
The analogy I always like to make is this town has struggled to make toast, let alone make a souffle.
Yeah.
So it's when we can make a really good piece of toast, we can start thinking about maybe baking bread. But Councilman Pasqua.
It's a great suggestion. And actually, we used to do that when we had a financial town meeting way back, because when that was our only method of approving a budget, and we could expect, 300 people showing up at a high school, they would have a large presentation PowerPoint, and they give a lot more detailed information. So we've transitioned from different methods, as you know, adopting a budget, and we're still trying to work the kinks out with presenting to the public. But public participation has been very low with this. So a lot of people they look at the number, they want to know what the difference is between last year and this year, and they don't really care to ask any more questions. So we don't have this request that often, to be honest with you. So, but it's a great request, and I think we should definitely move forward in that direction.
And I just wanted to add on a separate note, because you had sent an email earlier this week. After Tuesday's meeting, myself and Mr. LeBlanc actually talked to Mr. Count for about 45 minutes. We stayed, had a very honest conversation, which led to us giving direction to Bob and Dan about their meeting and what should be offered and considered. So, I look forward to Tuesday's meeting in a way that responds to the public feedback as well. So I just wanted to add to that because you had sent that note. So thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the members who had the chance, and whether you did or didn't, thank you for responding publicly. I appreciate it.
Councilor Shockley.
First of all, I'd like to let you personally and anyone else listening online know that districts 2, 3, and 5 are up in November, and we have 2 at-large positions available. So please run for town council. And while it doesn't sound like I put as much work into it as you did, I also looked at a couple other towns' budgets, because I noticed we tend to compare our largest department to our other departments a lot and say we give the school this much and we give the town this much. But I wanted to take a look at what other towns compare schools. So I took a look similarly at some similar sized towns. And then I looked at Charahoe because it has a VOTEC. And I just feel like maybe that's a differentiator budget wise, although I'm not positive. So for 23-24, our local appropriation to the school was $50,500,000 out of a $78,550,000 total budget for the school. This year, they're looking for $52.5 for an $81,500,000 budget. So just some numbers that we have. So East Providence, I didn't see what their local appropriation is, but they, for 23-24, had a $97 million budget for their schools. North Kingstown, in 23-24, they had a $59,500,000 local appropriation for a $76 million budget. For 24-25, they're asking for $61,400,000 for a $79,700,000 budget. Cumberland, I didn't see what their local appropriation was.
They haven't publicly posted it.
But they did say they're looking to have a $79,900,000 budget this year, which is a 3.1% increase. And Charahoe, I could only see their local appropriation. And like I said, I did not put the level of time you put in last night, but Charahoe is a much smaller school district, but they have a $58 million local appropriation. So I just think it's something to compare, like how do school districts run? How much money do school districts need? As opposed to saying our largest department gets this much and our other departments get that much. It's just another way of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. And I did a similar kind of comparison, like even comparing like our police department to other, like, not just, this isn't just a focus on the schools, it's our whole budget. And I do think when you compare, like, it seemed like Cumberland was the closest to us in population. They have one more school than we do, but their population seemed quite similar to ours. And I do think that it's a budget worth really looking to and comparing and saying, like, are we kind of in line or are we following similar approaches to the way we fund? Because I think that we're close, but I think that, not to insult us, but I think maybe they're doing it slightly better, and maybe we could take a note of that before we officially like vote on this budget, because I do think that I could only base it off the budgets that were presented. And I do think that the school department side of the budget gave me a bit more information about what their plan is, how the budget they put forth is going to get them to that goal. And I'm just so not worried, because that's such an extreme term, but I think that there are just some general concerns that they won't be able to hit those marks without making sure, if it was the exact budget you presented, but the additional 800, I'm sure would be helpful, that we want to hit those marks for them, because if they're starting to hit their targets, then I think the town will probably be able to follow suit. Thank you so much for answering all my questions. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. I believe next was back left, unless you're all set. You were next, I believe.
Good morning. My name is Michael Brault. I live at 3854 Flat River Road. I would like to speak to the matter of level funding for the school department, at the very least. I'm a custodian with the school department and responsible for cleanliness and minor maintenance issues, snow removal. We are in a situation as a group where we could actually use more staff than what we have. We do the best we can with what we have. And we take a lot of pride in keeping our schools clean and well run. I'm not going to speak to teaching and other things that go on in schools, the more important issues. I'm speaking to a very limited issue. And I ask that you keep what I'm saying in mind, because I believe it actually starts there with us. Cleanliness demonstrates control. Control is where everything comes from. That's basically all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next. Morning.
Good morning. Oh, okay. My name is Alice Colby. I live at 10 Patine Street, and I want to talk about the AP classes in regard to the budget. The obvious point is that AP classes allow college credit to our students, but for me and a lot of my fellow classmates, they offer a lot more. This year, I took the AP chemistry class offered by our school. There were only 4 of us in the class, so it was very low enrollment. But I truly feel that this course changed the course of all of our high school careers. It allowed us to be in a close, friendly environment and learn about a subject that we were all interested in, with a teacher who was genuinely knowledgeable about the subject. I took honors chemistry last year, my sophomore year, and it was a completely different experience. In addition, next year, I want to take AP Calc BC. This is the highest course currently offered at Coventry High School, and it is the course that I have been on since middle school. I was in the first class to be allowed to take geometry in middle school, and since then, I've exhausted the math courses at Coventry High School. This year, I'm in AP Calc AB, or Calc 1, and without AP Calc BC, which 5 of us are intending to take next year, I would be forced to take an unrelated math course to fulfill the graduation requirements. And I also feel that these courses, these hardest courses in the school that only a minimal number of people take, these are essential to the college application process. as has been stated, like all of the people in Calc BC this year have gotten into incredible colleges. They've gotten incredible scholarships, and they bring notoriety to our town, and they bring success and respect. And I feel that even though these courses are low enrollment and not many people take them, they're essential for the most ambitious and highest achieving members of our school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations on all your achievement. Is your sister Lucy?
Yeah.
Tell her I said hello. I hope she's doing very well.
Okay.
Any comment? Thank you for coming forward to speak. I give you a lot of credit in high school. Not many students would do this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Pasqua.
I agree. You did a great job. And thank you for taking the time today on a Saturday to come up and talk about a very important topic. Thank you.
Councilman Capaldi.
I'm so impressed with your professionalism as a student. My daughter is taking calculus next year. So I want to congratulate you on your efforts of education and what you're doing. And you're gonna do great things when you go on and get as old as we are up here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just quickly, I got a picture of her from this side, if I can send it to you later.
I am caring for baby. I also feel that my other daughter, the thing I've encouraged to hear about the cooperation that's going on, get rid of that support, right? What the budget,
Oh, not on. Do I need to start over?
No, wait, it's okay.
What the budget needs to accomplish in, creating the citizens that we want for the future. People who have found their strengths, found what they want to do. One daughter that did both AP and career in tech and has put her on a great path. We've heard from my other daughter. It's put her on a great path. But that iteration back and forth of what does the program need to be to accomplish it? How do we work together to fund it across all of the places? Really appreciate the cooperation and just want to encourage all the sides. Keep going. It's making a huge difference in the people that I've seen come through our system. We're making great adults. So thank you.
Thank you. Student behind you. Hi. Just make sure it's flipped on the forward.
Good morning. My name's Eliana Bamford. I live at 32 Wood Cove Drive, and I'm a freshman at Coventry High School. It's recently been brought to my attention due to the lack of funds from our town in funding schools, many positions and programs will be cut. With this, my fear is in one of the cuts being made, our unified district program position will be one of them. I watch these meetings often, and I hear everyone worrying about the pond level being low or a new development behind Wood Estates being made, which neither I like, as many of you here, as I do live in Wood Estates. But more importantly, what I'd like to hear more often enough is the funding of our schools. The schools that are raising the future of this town, the future of this country. The schools who have clubs like Unified that promote inclusion, that find the isolated and lonely students, and make sure they have a safe place, a place they can call home. If we want this town to receive recognition and be seen as successful, as I believe many of you do, we need to stop glossing over the foundation of it, our students. And if we want our students to succeed, we need to make sure they are equipped with the correct resources to do so. Mental health is focused on now more than ever. Clubs like Unified are the ones looking out for the students who struggle to show up at school daily, the students who question their purpose of life. Unified has worked tirelessly to create such a strong community for the Coventry students. Mind you, with no funding. The only funding we receive is for a program head, which now may be in jeopardy due to budget cuts. Students come to Coventry High School for our CTE programs, AP classes, and programs like Unified. They make us stand out and show our commitment to our students. I care deeply about my education and want the best possible resources to succeed. I'm here today asking for help. Help save our school district. Help us save the lonely, left out, and isolated students who depend on programs like Unified. Help me save my future and the future of Coventry students. We always say once an ochre, always an ochre. Many of you here have once been an ochre. So let's help save the future ochres. With all this being said, I'd like to thank you all for your time, hard work, and dedication.
It doesn't go unnoticed. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Emily Smith. I live at 22 Chandler Drive. And I'm also just going to add to what Eliana had to say. I'm the president of our Unified Club at Coventry High School. And I just wanted to discuss that due to the town council's lack of support in funding our schools, I know the school department is planning to make several position and program cuts, which I also fear is the District Unified Program Coordinator position. This position is a huge part of our town and making our community more inclusive. The Unified Program is integral to our community, reaching beyond the high school, but also to every elementary school. The Unified Program has worked tirelessly to spread the message of inclusion throughout our community, making it a better place for all. Unified provides hope to those feeling isolated and alone. Moreover, our program is self-supporting with funds raised independently by the teacher and students, other than the salary of the teacher who runs it. Part of our Unified Program has allowed over 75 interns over the last 2 years it has run to go to elementary schools and promote inclusion. These interns have instilled the values of being an Oker, which is open-minded, accepting, kind, encouraging, and respectful. Each month, lessons with these themes are taught to all these elementary students. Faculty and staff have seen a significant change in the culture at the elementary schools as more students are being accepted and welcomed, which is all we want in our town. As a town council, we want your help. At a time when mental health and social and emotional well-being is being talked about more, programs like the Unified Okers would not be possible without funding. Without programs like this, you will see students' grades and mental health suffer. Speaking on a personal level, this program has simply changed my life. Last year, I went through a very difficult time and wanted to remove myself from the school district. I tried missing school as much as possible, and I never wanted to attend, but my attendance would show the complete opposite. I was in school almost every day because of Unified. Although I didn't want to go, I would look forward to Unified social events, Unified meetings, and anything Unified. I would look forward, it's not only Unified, but also the staff's unwavering support and dedication to our Unified program and students made me excited to go to school. If it weren't for the Unified program, I would have withdrew myself from our school district, and I know I'm not the only one. If the town council does not allocate more money for our schools, there will be less and less opportunities for students to thrive in a variety of programs. These cuts have devastated me personally already. For example, when they cut the Career and Tech Education Studies program. I hope students in our district don't have to face devastation of losing our Unified program too. I hope after hearing what I have to say today, you understand the devastating impact of not providing our school with more funding will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do for Unified. I kind of see you as the face of Unified. You're in every picture that's posted. I believe Ms. Anzalone was next.
Good morning, Amy Anzalone, 11 Orchid Trail. First of all, I don't personally know any of those students that come up here, but it makes me a proud member of the community to have them come up and be so incredibly articulate and advocate for our school and our town. So thank you very much, all of you that came up. I know I've said this before, but I think it's worth repeating. I'm a proud community member, and I am a 36-year employee of Coventry Public Schools. I've pretty much served in every single role you could imagine in Coventry schools in teaching. A special education teacher, a second grade teacher, sixth grade teacher, a school principal, curriculum director, and now the assistant superintendent. And hearing you all speak today relative to what your budgeting process is, which I never knew until I came up to central office, it made me think about the fact that we have so much in common. When you talked about how you go line by line and you talk about, you know, can we do with this? Can we do with that? We do the same thing at the school department right now. And I think the students that came up today, of which I did not know they were coming, highlight the incredibly difficult choice that we have to make when we go line by line. Of course, we don't want any AP programs to go. Of course, if that's the choice that the superintendent makes. Of course, we do not want unified. But I also want to bring, those are two programs, but there's also really tough decisions that have to be made. Mr. Cowart talked about enrollment is something we look at. The student that came up here a few minutes ago that talked about AP enrollment in a classroom and how she was able to get individualized attention. I want to speak to enrollment in when you cut teachers in elementary classrooms. Cutting teachers in elementary classrooms increase the enrollment in those classrooms. And I'll speak to a school that I know just a little bit about, being there as the principal at Western. When you have a number of students that are in a particular grade level and you have to cut that down to 2 teachers, where it was previously 3 teachers, you've now put 25 students in a classroom, which, as you heard the student speak, again, did not know she was going to say that, the amount of individual or differentiated instruction is extremely challenging to do. And so I'm speaking here as a community member of wanting those programs and wanting the things that students need to continue to happen, and say that the process that you are doing line by line is this painstaking job that we are doing too when we have to make these decisions. And I'm, appreciative of any support that you can give us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cowart.
Just briefly, a few minutes ago when you were talking about the pond and how important it was that it doesn't impact operations and the budget and in terms of doing what you need to do for the rest of the town. That's sort of been my point with the septic system at the high school. It's a situation that we're dealing with, but I don't want that situation to impact our operations. So it's a very similar analogy. And as soon as that conversation ended, it dawned on me that we're actually wrestling with the same thing. And that's why I'm advocating so hard to make sure that we have funding in the local allocation that supports schools, because we don't want a situation where a capital project destroys our operational budget in 1 year or future years. Thanks.
Anyone else in chambers, public comment? Mr. Murray.
Good morning. And thanks for taking the time on Saturday, and everyone in the chambers. Just since you mentioned,
sorry, name and address for the record.
I'm sorry. Luke Murray, 121 Hill Farm Camp Road.
Thank you.
You've done this enough, right? You mentioned South Kingstown. I want to put a little levity on that just for the public, either the listening or in the chambers, is that South Kingstown had a town manager that was there 35 years plus, Steve Alford, who's renowned throughout the state. Those budgets just don't appear, right? So they take a lot of work of staff, and it's very difficult to tell the story beyond the numbers. And I will be honest, like, our past numbers have been almost negligent, the way they've been categorized, the way our budgets have gone. So I want to applaud the administration now for doing what they're doing, because I see the moves, Dr. Savetti, you're doing by setting up certain funds. There's a lot of mechanics to it. Also, I will say that with regards to school, though, Coventry's allocation, local appropriations, 51 million, thereabouts. South Kingstown's is 56. Total budget in South Kingstown, 61. Coventry's 80 million. So we get a fair amount of generous state aid here that helps run the system. And I don't say we should appreciate it, but we're fairly lucky when compared to other communities. So this whole dialogue about the 80 million and the schools are lucky, we're not supporting them. We are supporting them. There's a lot going around with that. I think truth in numbers is the big thing, making sure that people understand that the local appropriation, what you're actually funding through tax dollars, is that 51 million mark, right? Not the total. And it's an $80 million corporation. It's what it takes to run it. As most of you know, it's salaries, benefits, that's the majority. That's 90+%. Same thing on the town side. So when we're talking about the cuts come in the margins, just like the town budget does. So I think the larger picture here that I just want to get across is the dialogue that's going on. We are one town, and I do applaud the public for staying involved. This is probably the highest elevation of conversation I've seen on a budget in this town in a long time. I've been there in the sweaty gyms at 12 o'clock at night. I was there when the town voted, not the town, the people voted for the operational budget but voted down to fund the debt. You know, this craziness. I was on the school committee when we didn't choose to go forward with a 4%. Then we didn't choose to go forward with a 0%. Then we didn't choose to go forward with a 2%. So we ended up level funded. If I remember correctly, that was a year before COVID. So this craziness has been going on. And I guess my point is it's not this council's fault. It's not the school committee's fault. It's not this administration's fault, certainly. This has been built up over decades. And I think the larger concern that I have, and the point I want to drive home today, is you can't take 20 years of neglect or plus and then, you know, sort of say, well, we're going to patch holes and do this and do that and try to make it work. I think, you know, when I look at the levy, the truth is we should be at 4% probably for the next 5 years because we're making up ground that was so much lost. And again, it's not the school department's fault. It's not this town's fault. You're doing it on your own budget. You did exactly what I asked for. And I want to give you credit is, you know, you're doing the sanitation, you're taking it on. You're funding parks again because we're a bedroom community. We believe in that, right? We're doing a lot of the right moves. I just want to make sure when it comes to schools that conversation doesn't get put in a silo. When you're making all the right moves as far as increasing wage for town staff and really shoring up the bottom line, that the schools seem to always still be the outlier. It's always like, well, but the schools should be lucky because they're getting $80 million. That's not really truth in numbers. You know, their expenses went up too. I would gain to guess even with some of the allocations you proposed today, they're still going to incur some cuts because with the contract and just increasing benefits, healthcare, everything else, they're going to incur more expense than they're going to get in revenue. It just is. It's a proportional equation. Enrollment in this district has gone down significantly since 2000. If I remember correctly, my number is about 5,400 students in the year 2000. It's now 4,100. For comparison, I'll go to SK again. They've dropped 47% since 2000. That's a lot. However, you can't just do line item cuts because, as all of you know, you lose one student, it could be for a number of reasons. You can't just say, oh, that student left, I'll just take those funds out of the equation because you're funding a classroom with students and you have to shift. So I say that to say that there's a lot going on statewide that this council is going to have to pay attention to as well over the next couple of years, because when the NESDEC data came out a few years ago, showed districts are almost peaking at 4,100 and staying that way. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. Nationwide, things are declining. And I saw Don take a lot of hits this year when he proposed an alternative plan. And I understand it came fast and it came hard and the public didn't agree with it. But I thought he took some really unfair hits on some of the dialogue that went on. People calling for his ouster. And I believe in his leadership. Probably, one of the best superintendents we've had. And so when somebody puts out real solutions to a budget problem, that then essentially gets hammered on it and almost, moving in the direction of losing your job, I think that's fundamentally unfair. Taking on real problems is what leaders do. And that's exactly what you're doing. So I think the conversation moving forward with regards to schools, when new plans get developed, it can't be, well, I'm not going to entertain that because my kid has to go to a different school. I know it's a hard conversation, but the truth is districts are consolidating. Warwick has shuttered 5 schools. South Kingstown has shuttered 3. There's a lot going on in the school environment now. With that, I did ask some specific questions on the budget through email. You do? Okay, so tangible tax exemption, well, it doesn't matter if I like them or not, right? Hopefully they're truthful.
No
right?
pressure. No pressure.
No pressure.
No
It's the numbers. So I did ask about the tangible tax. So there's a $50,000 exemption. The state was going to make us whole. Some towns I know didn't include that revenue. I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, so the town manager and I have discussed this. Obviously, you heard the timeline earlier of when our budget was put together. There was still a lot of uncertainty in what was happening with the tangible, exactly how we were going to get reimbursed. So one of our recommendations to the council when we're passing the budget next year is right now the tangible is still included as 100% of the real estate taxes or under the property taxes.
Okay.
What we're recommending is that we're going to ask that the council just same bottom line, excluding any other changes, take 320,000 out of that real estate tax line item, put it as a separate line item in the state aid which would be the projected tangible reimbursement.
Okay.
As you may know, right now, there's still discussion. We don't think we're gonna hear what the final result is, what mechanism or how that calculation is gonna happen, but based on what's currently existing in the legislation, we believe our reimbursement will be approximately 320,000 in that range, so.
Which is equivalent to what you're carrying right now in tax revenue under your
That's correct.
collectibles? Okay.
That's correct.
All right. So that's not money found, right? It's already
It's not
included.
money found, it's
Okay.
already in, it's
That's
already.
fair
in the
enough.
tax
You
line.
know where I was going with that. Obviously, if we
Yep.
could find that money, some kept it out. Healthcare carry costs, I asked about this, last year it was 9%. I know that you formulated the budget, based on an assumed rate, I'm assuming. So I think it's coming in at 4.6. Any,
Yeah, I was actually, last year, our healthcare costs went up 5.8%. Everybody's different within the trust. As you may know, you have different rates. So in fiscal 24, our actual increase was 5.8%. When we formulated the budget, we didn't have the information from the trust. So we had budgeted between 4 and 6% as an increase. Our actual increase is coming in at 3.65%. So there will be slight savings there. Again, when you're dealing with the dollar amount, 4.6% increase is what's actually in our budget, because when I'm budgeting on the town side, I try to budget based on the actual positions, who's taking insurance, who's not taking insurance. So our current budget includes approximately $90,000 of increase.
Okay.
You're talking, we budgeted 4 to 6%. Our actual increase is going to be 3.65%. So you may be talking there's $10,000 in there of extra savings that we could reallocate based on
it's
that
something, right?
reduction.
And listen, the point is not, I know how budgets work, you're not trying to poach everything there's unexpected to come up as well. You carry contingency, but there's always money at the margin.
Correct. And keep in mind, if we have an employee that's currently not taking insurance, but all of a sudden a spouse or somebody loses insurance, they have to come on our plan. That's now a significant change. We may be reimbursing them $4,000 or $4,300 for not taking health care. Now, if they come on the plan, that's about an $18,000 expenditure. So.
Investment income, I just mentioned, and we all know, like, we've seen some great returns this year. Those could be one-time monies, they could move forward, right? So we can't count on that, but I just had inquired about that, or where you expect to land.
Yeah, again, we've tried moving a lot of money around, so you're exactly right. We're currently getting on some of the funding about 5% return. So I expect this year to come in around 800,000, maybe 850,000 in that range. We did budget on a conservative side, although I do anticipate interest rates decreasing somewhat. But one of the items that we did put in place is, actually I have the number here because I want to remember, Council Resolution 2024-11, which this council approved a capital revolving fund. Whereas if we do have excess interest income, a portion of that can be allocated to that revolving fund to help sustain and build for future capital projects. So that's why it's conservative, but we do have the ability to transfer the excess funding with council approval to that revolving fund.
I think it's a good idea, putting it in a revolving fund, those one-time monies, and just to know, and you all know this, obviously we get the base minimum even on the reimbursements without the enhanced bonuses and whatnot under the stage 2 document. Anything good goes into the schools, will come back and you can leverage that funding. So that doesn't mean you don't have to do roads and bridges and other things, right? Fund balance, I couldn't find what we're netting in fund balance currently, or what the policy was. So
currently our fund balance, I would say around 16 million cumulative fund balance as of this date. That represents about 13% of this projected budget. To the best of my knowledge, this town does not have a fund balance policy or an established fund balance rate. Again, one of the items that town manager I would like to get in front of the council at some point is to establish a formal fund balance spending policy in accordance with the GASB standards. Right now, by default, we go to the GASB default spending policy, but within there is to establish a fund balance threshold. I'd personally like to see us establish a threshold at 20%, having a fund balance reserve of 20%. I think if we maintain that, that will help you keep your bond rating at the highest when you're evaluated by Moody's, Standard & Poor's, those type of rating agencies. So again, we're currently at probably 13%. I'd like to see us be at 20%.
And if I could, Mr. Savetti, I just saw some faces that in the audience when you said that number that basically said, well, what are we talking about then? If you take basically your savings account, your surplus, and you spend it on operations, we face a bond rating downgrade by almost a full letter grade, which affects our ability to be able to spend, get bonds, loans, etc. So I saw some faces that said, well, what are we talking about? We have all this money. That's not true. And I'm not a CPA like Mr. Savetti, but when you use those funds to supplant regular operational spending, the rating agencies look at you go, So I just want to make that clear. I saw faces.
Yeah, no, and appreciate that. There's a bond vote in South Kingstown, $150 million bond. We've intentionally kept that fund balance. Our policy is 17% maximum. But that's where we're at with fund balance. And, the point of the question is seeing where you're falling, right? We're not at the minimums. 13% is somewhat healthy, right? And GFOA, I think, is 2 times your normal operating costs, like to carry for 2 months of operating. It typically. Okay. So no money there, right? Keep trying. And listen, I'm not trying, but I think this is beneficial for the public too, to understand that you're looking at these things, right? You're trying to find the margins. The school bond, I couldn't find the actual, I know you'd mentioned 225,000-ish, I think, in payment, 240. Okay. Is that the full payment on the bond, or is that just to ramp up during the initial period? Because I'm assuming you're going to flow everything at once, right? You're not using bands or anything.
That's correct. Yeah, what our financial advisor, PFM, they'd put together a schedule when we were talking about the bond. I thought I had a copy here, but anyhow, the first year we looked at, taking out obviously the funds all at once, so we'd be able to get an investment return on those funds. So they projected an investment rate of return, an interest only payment due in the first year, and that 243,000 is the net.
Okay.
So that's the anticipated net amount that we'd have to fund after allocating the interest that was earned towards it. In future years, so year 2, after state reimbursement, the projection is approximately $900,000 of additional debt service that the town's going to have to include in the budget.
That's really what I was looking for. So it's around 900,000.
Yeah, it's about
That's our
889 is the projection. Obviously, things change based on where rates are going. That was end of August of 2023, when the financial advisor gave those numbers. So things may have changed slightly.
I think my concern, schools won't like this, but we need to start building that into our base, right? If we just hand it over to schools, that means that you got to take it back from schools next year. That doesn't help them, right? It's one-time funds. So essentially that doesn't really help the equation all that much. I appreciate the effort, but again, it's not building into the base, and that's going to be another decision. We're kicking the can down the road till next year, right?
Right. Again, that's very similar with the other component for the leases, right? Sanitation vehicles, we were looking to stop putting aside 190,000 starting this year, where we could fund the sanitation vehicles over a 6-7 year period and constantly have that in the budget. But again, when the council was looking at what could we cut without impacting other departments, those are items that, I want to say it's a wish list where it'd be nice to build those, but if the funding's not really needed for this year, but you're right, next year we would have to bring in the 800,000+ plus the 190,000. So you're looking at, 1% increase or 1.25% increase in the budget next year, strictly going for those
Right out of
items
the gate.
themselves, out of the gate. Correct.
Where's the levy currently stand? I've seen it bounce, right? You had an initial proposal, it got peeled back.
Yeah. So
You mentioned so where are we right now with those?
based on what was advertised for these meetings, the tax rate increase was projected to be approximately 2.97%, which a levy increase was 3.13%. So the increase in the levy is 3.13%. Based on the figures the town manager provided earlier today, saying recommended, you can go up $200,000 on the levy. That brings us to 3.57% of the cap.
So based on that, if you were to go the full 4 or just under, you're probably looking at $300,000 to $400,000 in additional revenue total.
Correct.
Ballparking.
Yes. And keep in mind, you know, that would be still, if we did at the 4% and come up with that number,
Yeah, you're at 99.6.
99, yeah, 99.
What we're carrying, you know, I mean, it's all based on, I don't know how your past experience has been. It's been pretty
Yeah.
good with the house sales, you know, so. But
Correct.
you're right, that is aggressive, right? You could certainly have notched that down and leave yourself a little bit of room. So, okay. Allocations, just, you know, I mentioned many communities tag the enterprise funds for staff, and that's one way to shoulder a little of the operational load. Are we doing that?
If we had an enterprise fund that was profitable, we probably could. Right now, the town currently allocates 200,000 from its general fund budget to
Profit.
support the sewer fund budget. So if we wanted to allocate my salary, town manager's salary, we'd simply allocate it there, charge the enterprise fund, but then we'd have to give them more than 200,000 to help pay it.
At what point is,
What's the status of the sewer fund again? How much is that in debt?
I apologize. I'd have to get you specific numbers. Well, that's what the 600,000, 700,000, what they owe on the due from, but that's a revolving, you know, amount because we have pooled cash.
I'm assuming you guys are looking at the rates to adjust those to cover that over time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I won't go down that road. I get it, you know.
Well, it's, you know as well as that most of Coventry is not sewered.
Mhm.
The way that you stabilize the rates and stabilize the account is increase the amount of users.
Mhm.
But in order to do that, you have to take the gamble up front with the funds to fund the sewer installation and finding that money. Yeah.
Get it.
Spend money to bring money in.
Well, that's a good point. I'm going to come back to that one.
Can I just add one other thing? So, you know, over my 30 plus years, you may know, I did audits for many communities. I audited South Kingstown for probably 20 years. So I worked with Steve Alford, worked with Alan Ward back in the days. You can see a lot of communities also charge, you know, some of the finance costs, so salaries and stuff, they charge it to the pension funds.
Mhm.
We don't do that here, at least from what I've seen. And again, my point there is we can certainly charge portions of salaries to the pension funds, but then you're just looking at reducing the funding of those, right? Your actually determined contributions probably going to go up in future years, and you're just going to drain those funds. So
Yeah, I'm not looking to play games with the money. You know, the enterprise funds, if you have appropriate user rates and you're actually profitable, it can be a good way to offset expenses. I want to get into legal services one. I know that you've had a lot of individual legal battles going on, including Johnson's Pond. I don't think it's fair for me to start dinging you. I brought it out is that for future, as hopefully our continuing litigation goes down, that we just continue to look at those legal services. So there was a comment made about, you know, it takes money to make money. And I think the biggest thing I just want to leave today is we started, I believe, higher on the levy. You know, the town manager came in higher, right? 3.9. And then we chose to, you know, we take an ARPA and we're moving stuff, which are all one-time funds, and we're trying to jockey. And I think we're overthinking it a little bit because, to my earlier point, we're in a hole, right? You don't dig yourself out of a hole by trying to continue to find ways to just, can we push this off? Can we kick the can on that? Can we take the debt bond payment, push it over here? It's the same conversation I had last year when we were talking about this $500,000 in CIP that we were going to take in ARPA and we weren't going to build it into the base, right? And you listened, you put it into the base, and you made that adjustment. The one thing I just caution is, you know, strike the balance with the schools the best way you can. I mean, you're almost at your limit. There's a certain amount, and I think the dialogue that the council isn't supporting schools is a little unfair, right? Because I don't think you're not supporting them. And I think there's been a great dialogue between the administrations I haven't seen in a long time. But I do think that, and the tax hawks are going to hate me for this, but putting the levy higher and funding a maximum amount puts the stake in the ground and saying, we're getting serious on all fronts, right? It also sets the tone of there's a limit. And you're not going to have, you know, you're not going to be able to do that every single year. Schools need a little bit more time. I think the superintendent needs a little more time. You saw this year what he was willing to do. Go out to the community and take the bullets. And I think that trust, you know, having trust in him to give him a little bit more latitude over the next year to make some strategic cuts and then roll out a plan into the next few years would do a lot. And I know that, it sounds like you're trying to look at all the margins. You can. I don't want us to be short-sighted. And I hate paying taxes. Let me just put that out there. I write that, we write that check and I shake my head, but I know what kind of community I live in. It's a bedroom community. I chose to live here. My house in South Kingstown, I couldn't even afford to live in South Kingstown, even if I wanted to. And my house in South Kingstown would be $400,000 to $500,000 more. I mean, it's crazy. 2 bedrooms down there going for $600,000 to $700,000. So this is a good bedroom community. This is becoming the affordable option for a lot of people, which that's why I do have faith that we're actually going to stabilize some of the school population here, because people are moving in. Families can't afford it here. But that means that our priority should be funding those services that support a bedroom community.
Well, I think too, we talked about this at the Tuesday meeting and you mentioned it, there's been 20 years of financial neglect. And the biggest thing that I've said is we cannot make up all that lost ground in one budget cycle. And like you said, we have legal limits of how much ground we can actually make up. So I think you're right. I think that we have significant gains to ground to catch up on, but we're not gonna be able to do it all in one year. And to the point about the reconfiguration, I too think that Mr. Cowart faced an incredible amount of vitriol and bullets. And I even talked to him, I said, if the town council was maybe brought in the loop on what the plans were, maybe we could have been a united front on whatever proposal there was to be considered. And I think it would have made a difference if the town and the school committee had all come out about whatever plan it might be, or even in the future, to show the community that we were united front on that. So I think there's a lot of things that can be built upon. But as always, I want to thank you for staying engaged and anything else. Luke's also offered a lot of great examples of things we can copy here from his work in South Kingstown, and it's always appreciated. So thank you. Councilwoman Shockley.
So a few things have been said here today that I think really can help us move this forward. I think in comparing our town to other school districts and saying, maybe there's something to look at. Cumberland as a mayor and North Kingstown has never had a budget process where the people vote on it. So they are able to plan. We have to give 3-year projections, but if we're giving 3-year projections without any knowledge of what our budget's going to be, what's the use of the 3-year projections? So I think even though we can't fix the budget this year, we could break it. So it's amazing how you could get 4 100s and then a 0, and suddenly you're not getting an A. So with giving such a low allocation to the school this year, we could break it. And I don't think that that's what anyone wants to do. I think it's taking us too long to have these discussions. Like, I love that publicly people have come out and now there's discussions being had with Mr. Cowart. I think we should start these discussions on May 8th and be able to help the school plan for these cuts, because there are cuts that have to be made. But what we're doing this year for the town is saying we made decisions and we're going to be true to those decisions. Hillary, a few weeks ago, mentioned things she didn't want to cut, and I agree with her 100% on those things. So I think it's really important to see what we're doing to create a base for the town. And I think we need to do the same for the school. And while we know the school's budget, we see the town department's budget broken down to that level. And I think the whole council needs to get a better idea of that for the schools, to say, what are mandated? What are things you just can't cut? What are things we're trying to keep to make the school experience better for the kids? Like, when you're going from a unified program to I'm taking the hardest AP classes I can possibly take at these schools. These are 2 kids who came up to fight for totally different groups of people. And I don't think the town council can get that deep into the weeds necessarily. Like, that's the decision of the school committee and the school. But I think we need to understand what we can't cut. Because I think to a certain level, there's the belief that if we don't know your underlying, then you can cut. You cut last year, it's been said a lot. But I think there is a point where those cuts have to stop. So like I said, my biggest thing here this year is I don't want to break the budget. I'm not going to be on this town council next year, but I can see next year's town council being faced with decisions where all of these things we're doing for the town to move it forward, we're going to have to slash them because the schools are going to need this money. But if we create a base for both the town and I'm not going to say both town schools, I'm going to say all town departments, then I think next year's town council will be in a better place to move forward again. So instead of overcorrecting, looking directly at the end of the car and turning this way and that way every year, which has been what's happened because of a town vote on the budget, we need to start looking further ahead so that we can have a smoother path. And I think we have the ability to do it. It's going to be hard. I don't think it's going to be met with love from every member of the community, but I do think the schools need that baseline and the ability to plan, just like the town does.
If I may, just one last comment, I'll leave the podium here. One thing I noticed is vacant today, which typically hasn't been. I haven't heard anybody talking about increases in taxes and saying, don't increase taxes, right? I haven't heard that in a long time. I think everyone in this chambers and throughout is really, and you may be getting it through emails.
You'll hear it, mate.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Right? There's always that side of it, right? But that's exactly how we ended up in the mess in the first place, right? Because certain individuals in the community, and a lot of them, we all know who they are always dinging on it, not based on data. It was always based on emotion, right? Whatever suits me for this day is what's good for the community. And the truth is that that doesn't work, right? It's not what the numbers show. The numbers show we're in a tough situation. And so you either grow your way out of it and appropriately fund things and take the pain, or we're going to be right back here in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So take the pain now.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. Linda Brault, 3854 Flat River Road. I wanted to give the town council a little bit of a different perspective. I actually work for the school department in Woonsocket, which is very different than ours. And we are facing significant, much bigger cuts than the town of Coventry. The city of Woonsocket is actually in the midst of contract negotiations. I am a social worker for them. They are proposing cuts to psychologists, social workers, behavioral interventionists, TAs. We have a much bigger problem than obviously the town of Coventry. I love the town of Coventry. I went to Coventry High School. Our daughter went to Coventry. We live in Coventry. This is where we're going to be for the rest of our lives. We have a wonderful home here in Coventry. It's our forever home. But I wanted the town council to understand, I see what the teachers, the staff, custodians, secretaries do for our school department. My school is actually 2 schools in one. We have 839 kids at an elementary level, and that is just one elementary. Obviously, our numbers in Woonsocket are higher, but I wanted you to know that all of the staff that I have ever met in education, and I have met a lot of them now, they work so hard to keep our schools running all over the state, but even also more in Coventry. And I wanted the town council to understand that it does start with everybody in the school and all of the programs. That's what makes Coventry so attractive to live in, is, our beautiful landscapes, our beautiful parks, our schools that are obviously very competitive. But I wanted also for you to know that it takes a lot to run our schools. It really does. And I see it every day of how hard everybody works. And I know that, it's up to the school department to determine how they do their funding. But I know they need your help. All of the school districts need help. We have old buildings. I mean, the Coventry High School, when we had our daughter go through, which was, oh my gosh, she's 25 now, when she was about 10 years ago, we went to do a school tour and I saw my desk that I graduated from. And I was, I did my little mischief like everybody else. I saw my initials on the desk of my homeroom that I was stuck in for 3 years. Yes, that's a, and then there's everybody else sitting there.
That'll be $200.
Oh, but I was like, oh my goodness, I've graduated so long ago, and here's the desk that my daughter is looking at, and my initials are still on it. And even though it's a desk, but all of those things, little by little, changing the air filters, all of those little components that makes our schools healthy, clean, a welcoming environment. But when you start touching the schools, then you have morale go down. You have students that maybe don't want to come to school. You have parents that then become upset that maybe this is not the fit for their kids. And then they go somewhere else. And then they leave Coventry. And all of their tax dollars go out the window. And all of the money that they spend in the town. My husband and I, we love going out to eat different places. I went to Newport Creamery this morning, protecting a local establishment. And that's where our money comes from, is people spending money in Coventry, businesses opening. I'm glad to see that we have businesses near the McDonald's, that strip. I was like, oh my goodness, for so long it laid vacant. Now there's businesses in there, and that draws in more money for the town. So if we can continue to support the town, and especially the school department, it brings people into Coventry. They want to come and live here and spend their money here. And that's what it really also boils down to. So I just wanted you to get a different perspective of someone that sees a city that is struggling. I mean, dear, struggling. We have, and here in Coventry, you're saying, oh, about, your roundabout figures of classrooms. We're topping at 25 kids per classroom in elementary with one teacher. And their problems of those children are significantly different, obviously, than here in Coventry, but there's still problems nonetheless. And I don't ever want this beautiful town that I have spent most of my life in to then go in a different direction because we're not funding the schools and also the town properly, so we can keep it the way we all love being here, because that's why we're here for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Florio is next.
I just want to say thank you for looking into and
Dave,
working.
just name and address for the
Oh,
record.
Dave
Danny
Florio.
doesn't know everybody.
Dave Florio, 153 Princeton Avenue, Coventry, Rhode Island. I'm speaking here as a citizen. And I just want to let you know, I'm so proud of the way you have been working with Don and our financial officer and your financial officer. And we've been working so well together. I'm just going to follow up with comments that Mr. Murray made about bedroom communities. It's come to my attention that Project Friends, which is a adult daycare unit, is moving across the street, and the citizens of Oak Haven have not received any communication about what's being planned there, which is a bus depot.
Talking about a bus depot, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And a propane tank, a huge propane tank, where there was already.
We're actually having a discussion item on this on the May 14th agenda.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to being there.
Great.
And you do great work. And thank you very much.
Thanks,
And
Dave.
thank you, Councilwoman, because it's happening in our district.
Yes.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Any other members here in chambers, public comment, before I go to Zoom? Yep.
Sorry, I can't promise this will be my last time, but I hope it will. I just wanted to, Trisha Hunt, 526 Camp Westwood Road. I just wanted to follow up with some of Mr. Murray's comments. I didn't publicly participate in the reconfiguration dialogue. I was quite frankly nervous, and I am a town teacher, and it was my first time really experiencing being on both sides. So I really tried to thoughtfully listen and reflect and put my ideas forth the best way I thought I could through email. But I do want to publicly say that I think that what Mr. Cowart proposed was a really financially thoughtful plan for the town. And I do want to publicly say that the way he was treated was quite frankly abominable by the town. And I hope that the people listening to this town meeting and this budget will understand now fully why that proposal was coming forth. And I think even though the town wasn't maybe brought in the loop in the way that they thought, I do think that sometimes we could have responded to people's emails maybe a bit more supportive of the school committee based on the responses that I received. So
If I could,
yeah, please.
I don't disagree with you, but it's just a fact that the school committee chairs frequently told me and my vice president to stay in our lane and not get involved with school committee, things that are in their purview. So that's why my response reflected, I have no control over this. This is a school committee matter. And that is why my response was as such. I am totally willing to have dialogue on something like that. But when I'm frequently contacted, being told what I can and can't say about the school department, that's why my response reflected that. So I know there were a lot of people upset that I wouldn't give my opinion on that, but when that's kind of the type of relationship that's going on, that's quite frankly why I had that response. But Councilor Shapley.
Yeah, I also feel possibly I could have reached out more, but when I was asked, and briefly in a social post, I did mention that this has, while economically, that was a large impetus behind it, that based on my interaction with Mr. Cowart while we were on the school building committee, it's also part of what he had always hoped for in that school consolidation, is that we would get those bands of students into the same building so that they would have everyone would have a more cohesive learning environment. Some of our schools that don't have as much outside contact would be together. Kids would know each other more when they got into middle school. I didn't speak a lot about it. I didn't overly insert myself into the situation. And I do agree that if it comes up again, we probably should have a better idea of the school's plan, not necessarily our own opinions on it. I don't know if my opinion about what schools should do matters, but to be able to say this is why the superintendent and the school committee are thinking of putting this forward could be helpful. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. And I do second Mr. Murray's thought process. I've been a part of a lot of different school districts in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Coventry is not my first one. I've been in Barrington. I've been in Reading, Massachusetts, some really successful communities. And I do think, not because he's my boss, but because what I saw even before I came here, Mr. Cowart is a really esteemed superintendent who I think comes and brings to the school department a lot of knowledge, expertise, and experience that I haven't seen anybody be disrespectful of maybe on this panel, but I think the town needs to understand where he comes from. And also Mr. Murray's point about tax levy, and I try not to participate too much in social media, so I hope no one comes for me publicly, but I do think that thinking and looking at other towns who have been in similar financial situations, they do go to the max for the tax levy to help slowly build themselves out of debt. So I do think if there's more wiggle room there in the tax levy, that it should definitely be considered. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members in chambers? Members of the public on Zoom, just raise your hand. And unmute yourself, please, and state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Helen Tiernan, 24 Vaughan Hollow Road. Thank you for all of your hard work that you do. I know there's so many hours put in that most people don't know about. So I want to thank you for that. I've been a town resident for 27 years now. And I just ask you to please support our schools, which are the building blocks of our community. I am a teacher in the town for 22 years now, almost 23. And my 3 daughters have gone through the Coventry public school system. They're now 22 and I have twins who are 20. They are all successful students and doing well because of the educators that they've had in Coventry public schools. They've worked tirelessly to give my children the education they need and that they deserve. So once again, I know I'm not going to get into specifics. A lot of people have done that already. But I ask you as a town resident of 27 years and an educator as well, to please give our schools as much money as you possibly can to support our future students and our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tiernan. Want to come forward? Sorry, I was looking that way. Just state your name and address for the record. Make sure the microphone's on.
Dina Teeple, 61 Old North Road. I just want to second a lot of the opinions that everyone has made here today. As a parent with the reconfiguration plan, some people have brought up, I will say I was one of Mr. Coward's biggest critics with that. He's dealt with me a lot in the past week since then. We actually had to sit down to discuss it. And, he's probably sick of seeing my name in his email box. But, my biggest thing with that whole deal was just the way it was brought to the parents. And I know that we've had discussions about that. And I can see it from both sides, parent wise, just didn't like how it was brought to us, the quickness of it all, the way it was presented to us. Just, it didn't sit right, didn't feel comfortable with it. The other side of the coin, I do see where it was coming from, why it was necessary after the fact, knowing what I know now of it, what we had to meet a few other parents, had a meeting with him for almost 2 hours. And, I do see it and there is a way to go about it, but I just think how it was done this time was just, it was done wrong basically. But, that's for, later on, if it ever comes up again, which I'm sure it will. But, and just to touch some base on some other stuff, not to I know there's been some tension between the council. It seems like with the school committee, just from the past couple of meetings, it's clear to everybody, just the interactions. But just one thing that I've seen constantly being thrown out between town council and school committee that keeps getting brought up is the teacher contracts that, they approved them. That's why, didn't help with the deficits and all that stuff. But I mean, it's not just the school committee approving those contracts that led to, this big mess. It's a part of it, but I mean, town council, you also approved those contracts that went to a vote. You also voted it. I mean, I know President Lehman, you did not vote on that. She wasn't for it. But, I know I watched the video last night after I was up till 2 a.m. watching it. So I knew, what was what.
A lot of wild Friday nights in here. You guys.
Yeah. I want to make sure if I comment on something, I know what I'm talking about first.
I appreciate that.
I'm like, okay, let's look through YouTube. This, my kids are sleeping. Let's just do it. Because, I taught in Boston. I was a teacher in Boston for 16 years. I worked at high school. Same one I went to, it was a trade school. I went out of district. So I know all about that stuff. And, my kids just started the school district down here. Up until the reconfiguration, I knew nobody in town. I've been here for 8 years now. I know people now, but, just the back and forth's got to stop. I mean, if you guys are able to help the schools, anyway, you should. If, the schools go under, the town goes under. I mean, nothing against the schools or the teachers here. I like the teachers, but I mean, I do wonder if I should pull my kids out and send them somewhere else if they can't get a good education. That does weigh on me. And it's nothing personal. It's just, are they going to get everything that they need? That's just the bottom line. And if I have to send them somewhere else, that's what I have to do. And it's going to kill me because all my 6-year-old talks about is, I love my school. I love my school. And all she talks about to her sister is, you're going to come to my school next year. So it's, it's not an easy decision. I know you guys have a hard job, and I know you guys, you put in all your time and your work, and same with the school committee, and, just really think about it. If you're able to help out, I think you should. Whatever beefs you guys got going on, if there is anything, because clearly something's amiss, not right, just put it aside. I know a lot of people have asked for a sit-down meeting for you guys to come together and just have a sit-down. I don't know why it hasn't happened. I've heard you guys say, yeah, we want that. They've said they want that, but yet it's he said, she said. Just, we're all adults. Just come together, sit down. That doesn't cost nothing, So this is us, just, one meeting. I think everyone can agree to that. Doesn't cost nothing. If something can work out, great. If not, it is what it is. But at least you gotta try, right? I think that's what just everyone wants to see at this point. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. It is what it is. If you got the funds, I think it was you, Pascula, I'm sorry if I screwed your name. You know, if you have the means to help, you should. If you can't, you can't. I'm not saying give the schools unlimited access to money. Obviously, that would be crazy, as much as it would be nice. But, you know, like you said, if you have the means to help, you should. If you can't, you can't. That's just life. But that's all I really want to say.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tiernan's hand's still up. I don't know if there's any other hands on Zoom. Public comment. Ms. Brady? Just unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Brady, 35 Yale Drive. And I spoke also on Tuesday night, and I just wanted to reiterate that I'm also for giving the schools more money. I am in a unique situation where I have two different types of children who are at either ends. One of my children has special needs and is in special needs programs and has a teacher's aide with him almost all day. My 5-year-old who will be attending kindergarten next year, he is a gifted learner and there are no programs for him at the school for like enrichment programs. So that will rely on what the teacher has time to give him. So if he's in a classroom with 25 plus students, she's going to have less time to help with the enrichment. And, you know, my fear is that he'll get bored and maybe he won't even like school anymore. But I do think that the tone of today feels different than the tone of Tuesday. I'm not sure why that is, but I hope that it's because the council is hearing parents and teachers and administrators' concerns and that we're headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands on Zoom? Last call for hands in here. With that said, do I hear a motion to close public hearing?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Councilmember Shockley.
Second.
Second by Councilman Pascal. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua,
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
President Lima,
Yes.
4 in the affirmative, motion passes.
And just lastly, a public comment for undocketed items. This is public comment on anything that was not on our agenda today. Just come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Anyone on Zoom, public comment on undocketed items, those that were not on our agenda, raise your hand. Public comment going once, twice, 3 times. Public comment is now closed. And at this time, I'll seek a motion to adjourn at 10:47 a.m.
Make a motion.
Motion by Councilmember Shockley.
Second.
Second by Councilman Pascal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The chair votes aye. We stand adjourned.